lights are done. Cabinet lights, coffee lights around the perimeter. We are looking at 22 watts. But the AC is done. And obviously, you're seeing the outside. Well, welcome back to the channel and part 3 of this cargo trailer camper conversion. If you haven't missed the first and second part of this series, make sure you check out the playlist area on my channel and watch those 2 parts after this video. And there's numerous parts yet to come. And at least in part 3 here, I'm going to go over this lift platform frame for the bed. I'm going to go over the kitchen cabinets and the kitchen countertop, and also the kitchen cubby areas that have removable totes. So we can remove those totes, and we're camping. We want to be outside. We don't want to be inside. We want to remove those kitchen products, food, plates, you name it, in those cubbies outside. And if it happens to be raining, we could bring them back in if we're forced to stay inside. Or maybe it's late at night, we want a snack or watching TV. But regardless, if you can, please subscribe, like, and share to my channel. I'm just starting out this channel, and hopefully you're learning something. But enough said, let's get this going. Now, I know some are asking why you decided to go this route, not actually having a dining room area. And for me personally, this entire camper is around luxury of sleeping on a full-size, damn near 1 foot thick queen mattress. And if we need, and we're forced to, eat inside, we're just gonna grab a plate, lay on the bed, probably while it's raining outside, right before we go to bed. And we're gonna be watching TV while we're laying in bed and eating our food. So having a dining room table, to me, really wasn't an issue. It's just me and my other half. And more my other half than me, she loves to camp, but she hates sleeping on a crappy mattress. It's plain and simple. Everything revolves around this bed. And being that we had to have a luxury mattress, it kind of limited us on storage area. So I decided to make this as a lift bed, easily access underneath it for storage. Like I mentioned in the first part of this series, if you're going to go with a 6 foot wide trailer, you're going to be forced to run that mattress front to back. You can't run it left to right. Obviously at 6 feet wide, minus roughly 3 inches of wall, you're under 6 feet. And typically most mattresses are about 6'6", maybe 6'9". Just ain't going to happen. So if you want that mattress to go left to right, not front to back, you're going to have to make sure you get a 7 foot wide trailer. It's really important. You know, I didn't mind sacrificing a little weight for this platform, being that everything revolved around the bed. I tried to keep it at 100 pounds or less, and I was pretty successful at doing this. I did measure this, and it weighed in at approximately 95 pounds, at least for the frame. I'm about to go over that here in a little bit. But I wanted to make this strong but lightweight. I think I accomplished that. But just to kind of show you how easy this is, and I'm using hydraulic brackets that I got off Amazon. I mean, it's easy to open and close this. And like I said, I can lift this with one finger, and at a certain point, it just kind of lifts up by itself. I started out with 2 brackets, and it lifted the frame, no problem. But by the time I put on a mattress, the pillows, the bed sheets, whatever else we had on top of the bed, that 2 brackets wasn't enough. We definitely had to go with 3. I definitely had to use 3 brackets. I started with 2 brackets, 1 on each side, and it definitely wasn't enough in my opinion. It definitely wouldn't hold up this much weight, at least with a 10-inch Ellsworth queen size bed, and obviously the platform. But by adding the 3rd bracket in the middle, I just made a little stud wall frame there, a little knee wall, and it's pretty effortless now. You can see I'm barely even touching this thing. And same thing to lift it up. Even a child could lift this. And it's pretty awesome, and it stays up. I'm kind of contemplating on putting in a 4th one, actually on the other side of this partition wall here that the middle bracket's attached to. So my personal opinion, 2 is definitely not enough, especially if you're going to a full-size luxury mattress. You're definitely going to need 3, and it can definitely lift it, not a problem. You just got to put a little more effort on lifting this. You can't do it with one finger. And like I said, I'm contemplating putting a 4th one. I'm not totally sure yet, but right now it's working out pretty good. But enough of that. Let's go over the details of how I constructed this lift bed. So a couple things before I start here. Number one, everything in this cargo trailer is, number one, not square, and number two, not plumb. The walls are not plumb. The corners of the walls of the ceiling, you name it, they're not totally square. So when you're building this, you're going to want to double check all that. So if you do make this square, but this isn't a square, it's something you really need to keep in the back of your mind before you start that construction. Last thing you want to do is build an expensive frame and it doesn't fit. Second is, if you do go this route, you need obviously keep somewhat of a gap here so when this lifts, it clears the wall. And it's really important to keep in mind what you're eventually going to put in here for a wall liner. And this is 1/4 inch shiplap. Yeah, it's a 1/4 of an inch thick, but it kind of cups and bows a little bit. And by the time this shiplap overlaps each other, it's actually a true 3/8 of an inch. And I actually tested that. I bought this liner before I purchased the structure for this frame and built it to make sure I allowed an adequate amount of thickness for this wall liner, because I actually built the frame first and then put the wall liner in after the fact. And I really didn't need to build or bring that wall liner all the way underneath the bed. You're never going to see it anyways. So why spend that money? So whatever you do, whatever liner you're going to use, make sure you take into account the thickness of the liner, how much of a gap you want, and then build your frame. So with that being said, I took 3 measurements, one in the front, one in the middle, one in the back. Whichever one was the biggest measurement, I deducted the thickness of the liner on both sides. For example, say like I'm using a 1/2 inch liner on both sides. Obviously a 1/2 inch times 2 is 1 inch. And I want to allow about a 3/8 to a 1/2 inch gap, be honest with you, being that this isn't totally plumb. If you run for a 3/8 gap, but it's not totally plumb on the wall or square from the floor to the wall, it could clear at the bottom, but start rubbing on the liner at the top here. So me personally, if memory serves me correct, I left a 1/2 inch gap here from what I estimated from my measurements. And then I went from there and constructed the frame. Now the bed frame itself, I used 1/4 inch 5-ply Baltic birch. Why? Well, I use 1/4 inch because it's light, and I use 5-ply because it's super strong. You know, you can get 1/4 inch plywood but it has 3 layers, and it's really flimsy and easily to break through. And I decided to spend a little bit extra money, and I went with the 5-ply Baltic birch. Yes, it's a little bit more, but I only had to buy 2 sheets, so it wasn't that bad. And I decided to run a 1x6 poplar pre-finished white board that I got from Menards here around the perimeter. And there's a little bit of a ledge here. There's roughly a 2-inch ledge here to kind of hold in the bed, not only on the sides here, but also in the back, especially when it lifts up and it doesn't want to slide down. And also on the front here, so if I hit the brakes, it doesn't slide off, which obviously would probably be pretty difficult here with this wall. But you can kind of see here, when I lift up this bed, you're really going to need that lip in the back so it kind of catches the mattress so it doesn't slide completely down into the wall. Now underneath here, I built everything out of 2x4s. The whole perimeter of the frame is 2x4s, and the joists going left to right are 11.5 inches on center. And I'll splice in a picture of the diagram that I drew up for this. Being that I'm an estimator and an architect, I can kind of do that on the fly on a piece of paper and an architect's ruler. Really does help before you invest all that money, give you an idea and some direction before you actually construct it. If you have that ability, I highly recommend doing that. But you can see the perimeter of the poplar 1x6, a perimeter of 2x4, and then every 11.5 inches on center, I ran a 2x4. Why 11.5 inches? Because I'm only using 1/4 inch plywood. I'm not using 3/8 or 1/2 inch or 3/4. I need to span the distance anyways. And regardless, if I went not 11.5, but I say I went 2 foot on center, I'm really not talking that many 2x4s. And one of these 2x4s is really not that heavy. You're only talking probably 6 pounds per 2x4. So I'd rather have the extra strength and sacrifice a little bit extra weight. But you can kind of see what's going on with this frame. And it's really not that difficult. You just got to make sure you take those careful measurements to make sure you got an adequate amount of gap to make sure it clears once you put in that liner. Like I said, I did not bring that liner all the way to the floor. I probably would have to run this 2x6 all the way. I could probably stop it right there, but I needed the extra width, at least on this board, to attach the frame, at least on the side frames. And I could have ran it probably up to here, and then what I did is I ran a 2x3 the rest of the way. And I PL 400 and not only glued but screwed this into the 3/8 OSB wall. And I just made sure that all these existing screws here that came with the cargo trailer, that they're all super secure. They're all fastened right into the metal frame itself. And like I said, I ran a 2x6, 2x3 here on both sides, so you can see that. And then I built a little knee wall here in the middle for the middle bracket frame, so you can kind of get an idea of what's going on with that too. So like I said, I started out with 2 brackets, 1 on each side. It wasn't enough. I had to add this little knee wall and this on the side, which is fine. Kind of made a little area here for our spare tire, and actually works out really good. And I actually got one of these ramps here that you can use, so if you do get a flat, you don't have to bust out a jack. Especially with another reason to get a tandem axle trailer is you can just say, like, one side, you got 2 wheels, obviously, say one blows out but one's not blown out, you can just run your trailer on one side, the tire that's not blown out, on this ramp. It lifts the whole thing up, and you could pop this the bad tire off and put on the spare. And I made sure it was a full size tire, and it wasn't some El Cheapo spare tire. Out of 2x3s, a little mini knee wall here. This is actually a service panel here for electrical. I actually have an outlet here for the refrigerator, which the refrigerator is eventually going to go right here. And I'll splice in a picture of what that looks like. But it's pretty simple. But I would highly recommend glue and screw these boards to make sure vibrations going down the road and all that good stuff, that those don't come loose. Now in the back here, I did put a cleat board to kind of support the middle of the frame. So what I did is I built both sides, constructed the bed, got the first and last bracket on, and then brought it all the way down, and then marked this with a line and put another board here, so when this comes down, that the bed frame itself sits on this cleat board. And I put a cleat board on the top here, one on the bottom. That also gave me something to screw this knee wall to in the back. And then obviously I screwed down through this into the floor. And with 3 brackets is definitely enough. And I'm contemplating about putting a 4th bracket here. I'm not totally sure, and if I do, I'll get back to you guys on that. I overkill everything I do. It's just something I've always done in my life. But I actually use pole barn screws to screw this to the frame. I actually drilled extra holes in this bracket. You can see I just got this riveted everywhere with these humongous pole barn screws. And I drilled extra holes in the bottom of the bracket here and put just an insane amount of these pole barn screws. Just don't want this going anywhere, especially with the vibrations going down the road. The front face of it is just that 1/4 inch wall liner. It kind of gives you an idea of really how thick that wall liner is. It's not that thick, it's super light. We're trying to keep the weight down on the trailer itself. Now once again, I overkill everything I do. I use PL 400 on every single corner joist to rim connection. I use screws. I didn't use nails. And even for the top, before I put down that plywood, I ran beads of PL 400 actual subfloor adhesive. You can get PL 400 subfloor adhesive at Menards or most local lumber yards. When they put down that subfloor, they use PL 400 to make sure that this doesn't squeak, and it just kind of glues it all together. And then I got 2 sheets of that plywood, one here, and then I just used some drywall screws and screw those roughly 1 foot on center, every 11.5 inches on center on those joists. And this thing is like the Rock of Gibraltar. It doesn't It doesn't rack, it doesn't squeak, it is super solid. Now to finish off the front side of this, what I did is I actually got a cedar picket. This is actually not a 1x6. This is actually just a cedar picket. They're really cheap at Menards. I believe I got this for like $5. And 1/2 inch, keeps the weight down, gives me that cedar look. That's what I was going for. And then I just used a mulch strip here. I used a mulch strip down there, and I used a outside corner for this little cap. So if this gets damaged, I can easily replace that. I did not glue, so I could easily take that on and off if it gets damaged. And then Menards sold this handle, and just kind of give you an overview of the bed. Now, being that there's storage underneath this, and I'll splice in a picture of what this looks like completely filled up, but I bought some really heavy totes that are gonna last damn near a lifetime. Whatever the height of those totes were, I measured a 1/2 inch, and that set the height of this platform frame for the mattress. That's where I came up with the elevation on this. Also, when I framed this wall, I kept in mind that I was gonna put damn near 12 inches of mattress, a couple extra inches for bedding, and then I left, I believe, 6 to 8 inches here for the pillows, just to make sure once I get the pillows on here that the pillows aren't encroaching into the window wells here. But I put somewhat of a cedar ledge here, and the pillows should ride right at that point. Should be nice, especially if it's not ultra hot out or not running the air conditioner. The reason why I designed this is to have his and hers windows. She wants to have hers shut, I can leave mine open and whatnot. But you kind of get the method to the madness. All right, so when it comes to the kitchen base cabinet, the kitchen countertop, which I got a 4-foot pre-cut chunk of really inexpensive kitchen countertop from Menards. Off the top of my memory, I believe this piece of countertop was only $60, but I'll splice in a picture of that from Menards website. I didn't want to cut this countertop unless I absolutely had to. I want to just keep it stock at 4 foot. And I was comfortable with a 4-foot kitchenette here. And when doing all this, you got to plan it down the road. I knew I needed the length of my mattress. I took the mattress, I added 1 inch in the front, 1 inch in the back for the bedding. I also wanted to leave, I believe I left a 3/4 inch gap here in the back. I had the 1x6, the perimeter, the length of the mattress plus 2 inches. I wanted to leave, I think it was 3/4 inch gap here, and this set the tone of this knee wall. Once I had that knee wall, which I constructed this out of 2x2s, and I also have a 1/4 inch of liner on both sides of that. Obviously a 2x2 is 1.5 inches, a 1/4 inch on both sides, that brings up to 2 inches. The length of this countertop is 4, that set the tone of where this wall location was, and I had to make sure that it cleared this wall on the side of the screen door. So once again, measurements. You know, once we purchased our refrigerator, I added, I believe, 3/4 inch on each side, an extra 1.5 inches to the width of the fridge, so I had enough room to slide this in. I had 3/4 inch on each side for air ventilation. You can see on the back here, I actually have an electrical runner, so once I do push in that fridge, it doesn't crush my electrical wiring. It keeps it nice and safe. Also, this electrical runner spaces out the fridge, so it stops the fridge from sliding back too far, so the front of the fridge runs flush with the front of my kitchen base cabinet. This knee wall I built out of 2x3s, and I actually ran the thickness this way, 1.5 inches plus a 1/4 inch of liner on both sides. I'll splice in some pictures of the raw skeletal framing of this before I lined it, just to give you an idea what this looks like. I almost purchased a pre-made base cabinet from Menards, but I came to the conclusion I was forced to build this by hand because the measurements just had to be just right, and I had to make those adjustments on the fly. I wanted this all aligned anyway, so I said, screw it, I'm just gonna build even the kitchen base cabinet out of 2x3s. So it's more just knee walls than anything. And then you can kind of see underneath here, at least with the kitchen sink that's in there. Now, let me remove this kitchen sink. The reason why I didn't hook up this plumbing yet, because I wanted to show you all this. But you can at least get an idea on, here of how I did this little cubby slide out drawer. Now obviously it can't be a full depth drawer. I got a sink here. So I had just enough room here. Off the top of my memory, I believe this was roughly 5 inches. And I actually built these door faces and this out of really inexpensive 5/8 cedar pickets that you can get at Menards. Like a 6-foot chunk is 5/8 cedar, 6-inch wide picket that, you know, I ripped up as needed, use it for the side here. You can get a 6-foot chunk of cedar picket for, gosh, what, $6-7 at Menards. It's really cheap. And at least on the back side here and the front side, knowing that I was going to put on this face anyways, I wanted to keep the weight down. You can actually see I used the same 1/4-inch tongue and groove ceiling liner that I put on the ceiling here for the front and the back of this little cubby drawer. And then I got soft close track here for each side. And I really had to scratch my head on how I was going to do this. And this is what I came up with. And it does take some thought process. And you can see I got a removable left and right stopper block here to make sure that this doesn't slide out too far. It just stops it. And these are just 1x3s that I screwed the close soft drawer track to. And I'll display some extra pictures here of how I constructed at least this cubby drawer of the kitchen base cabinet itself. And I actually framed these drawer fronts out of cedar pickets and I sanded them down a little bit. You can see I used the same 1/4-inch tongue and groove cedar liner on the ceiling on the front here, and I constructed these drawer fronts by hand. And they're really not that hard to construct, and hopefully these pictures that I'm splicing in gives you an idea of how these are done. But this just works really, really good, and it's kind of like a soft close thing, and also keeps it closed. I'm actually running a DC 12-volt pump on, and they're going to go to one storage container for potable water and one for wastewater. And I'm eventually going to show that here in the future parts, but you can see I already have my wiring coming off of this switch, which is to this DC fuse box, which is hooked up to EB3A Blue Eddy solar powered, or solar rechargeable, I should say, power bank. And you can at least right now see just all my lights running right now. The front lights, all the coffer lights, lights above the door. At full bore, we're at only 22 watts. And that's going to come in the future part of this series here. You know, if I dim these down, so nice and dim, and say like we're watching TV, and I switch this off, we're only using 6 total watts, and at 87% still lasting 30 hours. And this will charge up on my outside solar panel to full from 0 in roughly 2 hours if I got nothing but sun. But just to give you an idea of what's coming here. But back on track, this kind of gives you an idea of how I constructed this. And I did all of this with really inexpensive cedar pickets, fence pickets, and it turned out really good. And I glued and pneumatic stapled all this together. And when I say this drawer face is feather light but ultra strong, I can't stress that enough. And I got some self-closing hinges here from Menards. I really prefer this style hinge. Hopefully this picture is coming through on this style hinge that I use. And I use 3 of them. And it's self-closing, so it kind of snaps into place and kind of holds this shut as we're going down the road. And I made sure I hinged it on this side so it swung this way. But just to give you an idea at least how this works for the kitchen base. And as for attaching the kitchen countertop, I just ran, I believe, yeah, these are 1x4s, one in the front, one in the back. But I also put in a little bit of a toe kick area here in the front. And then for the base face, this part behind the actual drawer fronts here is I just got a really cheap Douglas fir that looks like cedar, 2x4 from Menards, and I ripped it up to, I believe this is 2.5 inches, and it looks like cedar, but it's actually just a fir 2x4 that I think cost me like $5. Now, my better half and I, we really kicked around doing upper cabinets here, but we wanted something that was multi-purpose, something that, like I said, when we're camping, we want to be outside. We don't want to be inside. And if we're inside, it's because it's raining or we're about to go to bed, or we're stuck out in a parking lot or something like that. And I designed this so you can just pop this, and I got some, you know, old-fashioned black style hinges, turned them upside down. They sold this handle at Menards too, and you can just bend that down just like that. It kind of hides this underneath light here that I constructed. And these I also got at Menards. They're just some really heavy-duty wireframe baskets. And then I had some leftover 5-ply Baltic birch here from the bed frame. And you can see, at least in the bottom of these, I just cut up some of that plywood and use it at the bottom of these drawers. And then I kind of lightly sanded, you know, a slight edge around the perimeter of that. And these are really heavy duty, very strong. We're not worried about those warping at all. But say like we want to make some sandwiches and we want to take this outside, we just take it outside to the picnic table and do what we want. We're done, ready to go home. We just put these back in and close this back up, lock that, and we're good to go. At least on the back side here, you can see I used some really heavy duty, I believe these were 1/2-inch lag screws. I had to get them long enough, a specific length to the thickness. I believe this was a 1x6 in the back. It's actually 7/8 of an inch thick. I have a 1/4 inch of liner, a 3/8 of plywood liner that came with a cargo trailer. The depth of the wall is 1 inch, and then I subtracted a 1/2 inch to make sure that these didn't poke out through the walls. And then I got these heavy duty washers here, and I put 2 here, 2 here, 2 there, even popped 2 screws here, just to make sure that this isn't going anywhere. And that was fine by itself, but I thought I'd put some decorative brackets here that I also got from Menards. Just kind of give it some extra strength and some additional appearance to this whole setup. But I think this is really cool, and it didn't cost me that much. Matter of fact, Menards sells these rustic 2x4s, like a rough sawn 2x4 cedar. I did spend the extra money. I wanted that cedar look. I personally cherry picked this 1x6 out in the back that kind of had some, you know, knotty wane here and just has some aesthetic appeal. Cherry picked out these boards to make sure they weren't checked and cracked. I can't stress this enough. You want to make sure you pre-drill everything on this. And I'll splice in some pictures of this too. But you can see the first and last 2x4 is actually longer than the middle ones because the thickness of this front board, which is 7/8 of an inch thick, needs to run flush like so. So the middle ones are actually shorter than the first and last. This is a 1x6, and then I ran a 1x6 here and 2 1x4s all out of cedar. And I did invest that money on the cedar. It wasn't exactly cheap, but I did it for the looks. And I think it looks phenomenal. And not only does it look phenomenal, but it's functional. And I think when everything boils down to it, it's all about purpose and function. Is it easy? Does it make your life easy? And I think this does, and gives it a really nice aesthetic appeal. And that was kind of the look we were going for, you know, the cedar here with the cedar ceiling that flows into the back. And then we didn't want it all cedar, so we did kind of like a whitewash liner, which I'm going to go in depth, not only on the wall liner, but the rear liner, the ceiling, in the next part of the series. Well, hopefully this helps you out. You know, the thing is, I don't expect anyone to do exactly what I'm doing. Hopefully you could take something from this or maybe learn something. I don't know, but I'm doing this as an example of what maybe you could do a spin-off of this, or give you some ideas or suggestions of what you need to look, you know, further down the road before you construct that stuff, so you don't waste time and money. It's really important. And I think I have to cut this at this point of this series, part 3, and in part 4, we're going to go over the wall liner, the ceiling liner, the insulated ceiling, all that stuff, the remainder of the framing of the walls. I will go over that in part 4, but hopefully you learned something, and if you did, scratch my back, and I'll continue to scratch your back with this series by not only subscribe, like, and share, hit that notification bell. When you do hit the notification, make sure you hit notification all. And I will see you guys in part 4.